Welcome to The Holistic Nurse with your host, Peggy Smith. Peggy will introduce and educate her viewers about the differences between alternative, holistic, and complementary medical therapies. Her goal is to empower the lay medical consumer to learn how to advocate for themselves. So now, please welcome the host of The Holistic Nurse, Peggy Smith.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to The Holistic Nurse with Peggy. I am like to welcome new people that are here and let you know we've switched platforms. And our first guest today is well known to all of you that have been following me. It is Shaman Patrick from South Africa. He's a full-time practicing Himalayan shaman who's trained and initiated in Himalaya with over 3.5 decades of actual experience studying, training in the spiritual field. He comes to us from Cape Town, South Africa. Welcome. So happy to have you here with us today on our opening show.
Thank you, Peggy. As always, it's an honor. It's an absolute honor to be here. And I'm so looking forward to our conversation today.
And as you know, we do not have a scripted show here, and whatever you'd like to talk about today, our ears and eyes are open. We're just excited to have you back.
Okay, well, what I thought would be a great conversation would be the 7 fundamental spiritual principles and their roots in Western mysticism that became Western religion and Eastern mysticism, Vedic knowledge as well. And as this relates on a fundamental level to our understanding of reality ourselves, the macrocosm and the microcosm, as it were.
Okay, so was there anything you'd like to say as far as introduction first before you get started and tell people a little more about that I had said, or you can
Well,
go right in?
I'll start with the 7 Hermetic principles, which is probably one of the oldest tracking routes that you can see in the Western fundamental schools, which comes from pre-Egypt, the land of Kim. And there's very little known about Hermes Trismegistus, but he was considered a prophet in some ancient time. And these fundamental 7 principles seems to have filtered through into our Gnostic knowledge, which has become the egregoric base and background of biblical knowledge as well. And so we can see how all the angels, the choirs of angels, the archangels, the whole 72 quinets structure of being has come into our sort of understanding in the West. And these 7 principles are understood in the East as well as being the 7 fundamental principles, which we speak of as the 7 chakra. Chakra meaning revolutions, spinning, those cycles of life that we go through, and those spinning vortices within our physical bodies that are the connections between consciousness and physicality. What we say is the soul, you could imagine, well, the structure of the soul's incarnation into flesh is really what we're talking about. So I can dive right into the deep end unless you've got specific questions.
No, please do. I'm thinking of questions as we go, but I'll let you get started.
Well, to begin with, the 7 fundamental principles, and these principles are alchemical principles. They are the basis of Western alchemy as well. They are also the basis of the Kabbalah. They are the basis of Tantra and Yoga. They are the basis, you find them in Taoist practices as well, hidden and wrapped up. And it's got its own form of cosmogony. And the cosmogony, which is obviously, cosmogony means the creation of the universe. We see this cosmogony reflected in the biblical story. And if we've all, as we've in the West, read our Bibles, so I hope we all have, it's good to have a foundational basis, because this ancient information in the Bible can be seen in Chaldea, can be seen in Sumerian cuneiform tablets, also in the Akkadian cuneiform tablets, also in Sanskrit in the Vedas. So you've all read in the Bible that it says in the beginning there was there were the waters of the firmament. And the waters separated into the waters above and the waters below. And the beginnings of creation was the sound, was the word. God was the word was God. We've all read this. So where does this come from? Well, this comes from very ancient Hermetic documents, which we don't even know the true age of. So I'll run you through the 7 fundamental principles of Hermes to give you an idea of how this works. And we're going to sort of lean into physics a little bit while we consider these principles, because they do relate to the formation of the physical universe. So there's a certain degree of understanding the basis of, the structure of physicality and how consciousness and physicality are fundamentally connected. So the first principle would be that everything in the universe is a mental state. Everything. There is nothing in the universe that is not a mental impulse. Everything comes from thought. Thought is the fundamental structure of all things. However, thought is distinct and outside of this creation. And when I say thought, I mean thought as opposed to thoughts.
Okay.
We're speaking about the monad, speaking about ancient Greek literature. Before the monad becomes the duad, becomes a triad, becomes a quartet, before we have all the branching out of the different aspects of multiplicity from the unity, we start off with everything is a mental creation. Then from this mental creation, it's important to understand that nothing can be taken from it and nothing can be added to it, because it's complete in itself. So we speak of the Alpha and the Omega. We speak of God. Nothing can be removed from God. Nothing can be added to God. It is the substructure. Everything that creates is a reflection of this. However, this impulse thought to reflect itself, and this is what we call the splitting of the waters above and below the firmament. And in this process of splitting, there was movement. For there had to be movement outside of the unity of mind, of thought, in order for physicality to come into being. And so now there are a set of steps that this physicality took in order for the one to become the many, to become this one universe that we're living in, which is also, in a sense, a reflection of the unity. The first principle was that we observed was sound, vibration, the word of God. In the Vedic cosmology, we speak of Aum was the structure of the universe. The structure of the universe is Ahum. These are 3 fundamental states that come together in the Aum. And the Aum structures itself as Aum Tat Sat. And these 3 structures become the enneagram. 3 times 3 is 9. We see the same thing in the Kabbalah when we speak of the monad, the duad, and the triad, the first triad, and how this first triad is the reflection of Atzilut, which is the perfect state of oneness, which is our soul body, and how this splits off to become Bria and Yetzirah, which from a shamanic perspective is the lower world, the middle world, and the higher world. These are 3 aspects of dream time from a shamanic perspective. So all of these cosmologies, I studied all of these cosmologies before I went into the wilderness, before I was initiated as a shaman. So I had a background in Kabbalah. I lived in Israel with some of the Kabbalist masters, and I was trained when I was young in Cape Town by Masons of all people. So I had a background in Kabbalah and Hermetics, and I'd been training for about 10, 12 years before I went to India and got immersed in the Vedic studies. And then I met a shaman, and from there I went to live in the jungles. So, and became engrossed by beauty of nature, and nature became my spiritual path. Though getting back to the point, so you can see why I'm tying together these knots. For those of you that are practicing Vedic yoga, for those of you that are practicing Kabbalah, for those of you that are interested in the spiritual sciences at all, it doesn't matter which path you take. It comes back to the same fundamental point, the Trinity. And the Trinity is the fundament of all religions, whether it's God the Father, Christos, the Holy Spirit, or Shiva, Brahma, Vishnu, or the yin, the yang, and the Tao, or the upper spiritual world, the underworld, and the middle world of interaction. So Yeah, the vibration became the movement of the universe. So now we had movement, but because nothing can be divided from the monad, from the unity of thought, there had to be a quantum field of entanglement, which is the correspondence field. And this correspondence field is technically the second principle of Hermes. So the first principle is thought. Second principle is there's an entanglement of quantum, which means that one object occupies two spaces. It's very important to understand. One thing is in two places at the same time, because you cannot divide or subtract from the unity of thought, the first principle. Vibration becomes movement. That movement needs to be substantiated. Since nothing can leave the first principle, a part of the first principle had to be reflected outside of itself as if it were a photocopy, a copy of sorts. And so this was what enabled the principle of vibration, which is change, energy, and movement, or energy came from the vibration. Thus, because things were in a state of vibration and movement, there was a wavelength, there were polarities, yeah, like a pendulum swinging.
Right.
And the polarity of the swinging pendulum thus meant that there had to be one pole, another pole, and the continuum between, which then becomes an extension of the fourth principle, which is polarity. And the polarity in its state of vibration, providing energy, this is the heart center polarity, the polarizing effect. What they call in Kabbalah, the Merkaba, what they call in Vedic schools, the unstruck sound, which is something you experience in deep states of contemplation and meditation. This then had to find its own pattern of rhythms because we had all these different vibrations, interacting pendulums, and they started to synchronize with each other in what we call the music of the spheres. And this synchronizing patterns of polarity between the vibrating elements of the quantum entanglement field, which is an expression of pure thought, thus produced rhythm. And the rhythm then became the consistency, time, flow, beginnings and endings were able to be succinctly joined to each other through the principle of rhythm. And through this continuity of rhythm, which is expressing the polarity of energy, there came to be cause and effect, because some of the pendulums would then bump against each other. Now, when the pendulums bumped against each other, there would be an effect. And the cause of that effect would be a previous bump of pendulums, which created a stirring of the rhythmic field. And so we're talking about standing waves of vibration that produce matter, effectively. And this standing wave started to become crystallized, and we started to experience it as a fundamental state of physicality. And this was what we called the field of generation. And the generation became a polarizing effect of that which is above and that which is below, that which is within us, that which is outside of us, coming together, a synchronized joining of thought and matter as an experience of consciousness, the polarity thereof. So these seven principles then are the principle of thought, the principle of correspondence, that all things have a correspondence, all things are connected through this field of what came out of the monad has a reflection within it, hence as above, so below. The vibration principle, that all things are in a consistent state of movement, the polarity, that all movement has to be a movement between the polarity of an energetic system, and that the polarity of the energetic system is governed by the vibrational frequencies that govern by the rhythmic continuity of the vibrational frequencies that govern the time-space continuum, which then reflects as cause and effect, that every cause has an effect and every effect drives another cause, drives another effect. Wheel, a turning wheel, what we call chakra in India. And this then became reflected as the masculine and the feminine in terms of principles, not man and woman, but that which is taking into itself, that which is giving out of itself. Think in terms of entropy and anentropy, the movement of time, forwards, past, light, dark. All of these different polarities had to come together. And the union of these polarities gave us what seems to be a continuity of a single reality that we're experiencing, which we call matter. So that's the basic. I've tried to break it down to simplify it idea behind the 7 principles, which you will see people speaking of as the 7 chakra. And the 7 chakra are reflecting these principles: the Sasra chakra, the Ashna chakra, what people call the third eye, which actually represents whole brain thinking. All the hemispheres of the brain operating together as a single mode, giving one the ability to use the intuitive, the intellectual, the rational, the logical, all at the same time, applying emotional and rational intelligence to a single, a single state of mind, where one is able to be proverbially ambidextrous of mind. And obviously, the principle of vibration relates to the psychic abilities, to the spiritual powers that we hear about in religious texts, and the akasha, those dream places where we can get glimpses of past lives, glimpses of the future. So the field of vibration in the throat is really the seat of the soul, effectively. The heart chakra, which is the reflection of polarity, which is where we experience energy because we can feel energy. Energy is felt, and it polarizes the body by the plasma of the blood moving around, being polarized by the electromagnetic pulse field of the heart's beat, and the red blood platelets rubbing against each other to produce a static field of electrical potential, so that this electromagnetic field can move through the plasma of the blood to carry all the prana, the life force, which is of the heart, the polarity, the energy, to all cells, so that they can renew their electrical potential, because the electrical potential of a cell is important for health. Not just the health of the cell, but the health of your immune system. Or you can literally measure the electrical potentials of a cell, and if the electrical potential falls below a certain point, you start to get ill. So if you can raise the electrical potential of your cell, you get healthy. Vitamin C, what do you use it for? To make a battery, right? Ancient Egypt, they were making batteries out of vitamin C, out of citric acid, because it's got electrical potential. So when you eat this adds battery juice to your system, basically, and empowers your white blood cells, because it also empowers the red blood cells. So our science is slowly starting to catch up on this ancient knowledge, which has been hidden in the Kabbalah and hidden in the Vedic. The Ayurvedic knowledge is more complete in a sense, which is why I suppose Ayurvedic doctors have to study for longer to become a doctor than our allopathic doctors. And they don't just rely upon, being told what pharmaceutical product is good. They actually learn to make their own medicines. So, getting back to the principle, the principle of vibration then became that regulating principle, metabolism. And the metabolism is regulated through the pancreas, right? So how
Yeah.
active your gut is and your pancreas is dictates the metabolic rates, which is sort of controlled by the spleen. But the pancreas is really what creates the heat and the energetic potential, and whether sugar gets burnt off to become energy that will be moving things around the body, or whether it gets stored to become fats for later potential. And of course, the principle of cause and effect is the sacral plexus, which is relating to that watery effect within our body, the Svadhisthana, the sacral chakra. And the principle of generation relates to the root chakra. So that gives you an idea of the chakras and the 7 principles, and just the basis of where they come from. But now the question is, how do we use this? How is this usable as understanding these principles? How can it help us to alchemize and facilitate a polarizing potential within ourselves to actually change and assist in the process of transmutation of negative traits into positive traits that can become beneficial to us and turn us into more functional and wholesome human beings.
So when you first began, and this is like, really simplified, with the first thought that I had was in the Star Trek movie when Spock was dying, and his message to the universe. And thinking, yeah, I know those movie writers didn't have this knowledge, but that's kind of where the basis of some of the things that Spock's character has talked about over the years. And yeah, I was a Trekkie when I was younger. And from my musical background, of course, it's all about vibration and everything. Um, and so many people, I think, nowadays feel like they're just victims and helpless in this, big universe. So tell us some specific things that we can do to increase our vibrations and increase our health. You talk about the pancreas. Diabetes is just, growing as one of the major world problems. Um, and, so people don't realize, they curse their pancreas because it's not working properly, but they don't take any responsibility. And as amazing as all of this is, another thought I had as you were speaking is that it kind of gets back to gratitude, because we can be so grateful that, there is a universal plan for us that, ties us all together. And, you know, we shouldn't be fighting those forces, but, we actually can be very grateful that most of the time it works for most of us. So do we have some practical ideas of, what do we do to, you know, to reach those goals?
I love that you mentioned gratitude. The roots of the word for gratitude is gratis, and grati means free. Isn't that interesting? So gratitude frees us. It frees us from the entanglement of the desire body and the passions. So when you mentioned the pancreas, that's probably a good place to start. A lot of our issues come from that point. So we're speaking about the principle of rhythm. So this does relate to Saturn, this does relate to time, but it also relates to that driving force that wants to generate success, which is a big problem in this day and age because of the way in which we live in this financial climate and this, this
Mhm.
structure of the world. It's you got to be in it to win it. You got to be pushing. You always got to be moving forward. It's like we're pushing a ball up a hill, and that's like a big ball of finance, money, essentially, and career and work, and it's highly competitive, and so it produces a lot of stress. And so we're constantly um, overusing that chakra, right? We're overusing it because you get your goal, right? You get your goal from your guts, and it's that driving fundamental passion which will move us forward, which we see in the astrological chart as Saturn, which relates to wanting to get something done, that driving force, work. I think we need to learn to relax our desires, because work is related to desires, right? I want success. I want to get money. I want to get acknowledged for my work. I want to get a nice house. I want to get a nice car. I want to have my family well looked after. These are all desires. And when we're using that desire, we are depleting that energy center. So we need to recognize that the continual desiring is what's creating a huge problem, because the desire is actually the sacral plexus. So it's pulling all of that energy from the solar plexus down into the sacral, and it gets stuck there. And we get locked in this loop of causality, jumping through hoops. You heard the saying. That's really what we're talking about here.
Mm.
So the first point is to work with our desires, work with the principle of cause and effect. To accept what we have and be grateful is so on point, because when we're grateful for what we got, we don't feel we need that much. Like, do you really need a new car, a bigger, nicer car, or is your car okay? Do you really need that nicer, better house, or is where you're living okay? You know, do you need to have that jet set lifestyle? Do you need to go and eat in that really fancy restaurant that's so expensive because it's the place to be? Or so all of these driving forces that are driving us deplete this energy, and it causes us to overuse our passions to achieve. So the fundamental point is to look at competition. Are we being too competitive? Are we trying too hard to push that ball up the hill? And everybody wants more. Greed. I think greed is what we're talking about fundamentally. So we need to look at ourselves and be honest with ourselves and recognize, like, am I being greedy? Right? Like, am I really lucky to have what I have? I'm like the other people that have less. Wow, I'm so lucky. Thank you that I've got what I got. That's all. Like, I'm so lucky. And when we change that attitude to an attitude of gratitude, we free ourselves from the cycle of being trapped within that desire body that drives the passions. And passions, just to bring it back, is ion. Ions relate to energy. So when we become passionate, we're depleting the heart's energies, right? So passion and the heart are fundamentally connected. Even though we're talking about the solar plexus and the pancreas, the passion comes from the feeling. And the feeling of the heart is really what we want to be targeting. So when we start to resolve the issues of what our desires are, I want that girl, but in order to get that girl, I need that car and I need these clothes. I need to be that person. I need to earn that much in the year to get that life, because that's the life I'm imagining that I will enjoy. And in the process of moving towards that life that I would think I would enjoy, we end up sacrificing the life that we have, which we then don't enjoy. And that lack of joy produces stress, and the stress weakens our pancreas. And because we are weakening our pancreas, we then feel like we don't have enough energy. Because we don't feel like we have enough energy, all energy comes from the sun. The sun is polarity, right? It produces the polarity of night and day. So all energy comes from the sun, and that energy is then transmuted alchemically by plants into crystals of sugar, right? And then we require those crystals of sugar to release the sun's potential energy back into our body, which has been stored as a crystal by the plant, so that we can harness the power of the sun to get movement in our body. So it's metabolism. So the key
I
is to
also,
exercise.
I'm thinking of the image, if we're loading up on sugar to get that energy, there's a crash, the cause and effect, it's, um, so we need to achieve a balance, I guess. We were talking the other day about, certain people that had lost billions of dollars, and most people in my economic thing say, well, I'm grateful I'll never have that problem. There's different ways to look at it. Um, but some of the happiest patients that I've met over the years had nothing, but there was a family in South Carolina. Their kitchen floor was just dirt. It was the cleanest house I'd ever been in. I would have eaten on that dirt floor. There weren't 10 dogs running around stepping on it, and it was just, but the love was what made that, energy just right. Didn't matter what the physical things that were missing, because those people weren't wanting anything. They had love. They had a family that was together, and they were just grateful to even just be alive, to be here, and to be able to sweep that dirt floor. Um, so
The
it's a
key
challenge.
then,
Yeah. So yeah, we don't
yeah,
have a whole lot of time coming up, but how would you recommend people? I mean, you got to not keep up with the Joneses, but you got to keep up with your electric bill and your water bill, and the roof over your head. Um, we had a guest a few weeks ago. It was an attorney who gave up everything to be a holistic practitioner, because she realized, that made her much happier. She was actually helping people, not, she jumped out of that rat race, but reality is that many people can't do that. You know, and it's always the anxiety of the unknown that creates that anxiety, which sometimes drives that that rat race that we're in. So what is your advice to just be more accepting, and that practically still meet your needs? Maybe reevaluate what your needs really are. What would you suggest to somebody that was, at that crossroads?
well, that's the first step is your desire. And the second step is aligning your passions with correct desire. So spider diagrams. So use the second principle of Hermes, correspondence. Sit down and draw a spider diagram. What do I have? Everything. Then out of those things, what brings me joy? You can do Venn diagrams. They're very useful. These diagrams are powerful. Gives us a perspective of our lives. And then look at, what have I got that brings me joy? What have I got that causes me stress? What do I want more of? I want more joy. So what do I need? What do I want? And start to tick off the list of the things that we need and the things that we want. And for example, do you need to work that much more to earn that much more money? Or would it be better if you got a piece of ground to make your own vegetable garden? so that you can supplement your income of food with food you're growing by yourself, just as an example, right?
And there's a lot of
And
satisfaction from creating something yourself and not being dependent on others and tariffs and things like that. Yeah.
yeah, so the food becomes really important, what we eat, because unfortunately, a lot of the food colorings produce sort of neurotoxic reactions, food colorings and ADHD and ADH in children. There's been a lot of papers written on this, and we know sodium benzoate has effects with children. We know tartrazine was made illegal in the UK and many countries because of the effects on the brain, especially with children. So if you're eating junk food, you're probably getting a lot of that. If you're eating food that's got MSG in it, MSG causes heart palpitations, disturbs the rhythm of the heart, for example. Not good, not healthy. So you want peace. So you want to get a Zen diagram, and you want to add as much peace to your life as possible. There's certain stresses that are unavoidable. You got to go on the train. You got to go to work. Okay. So what are you going to do while you're on the train? Are you going to sit there and worry about your day at work, or are you going to see what can you do while you're sitting on the train that's practical, right? To make your day at work less stressful. Or maybe you want to have a CD with Mozart that you can listen to while you're on the train. So that by the time you get off the train, you're peaceful. Okay, you got to drive through a stressful environment to get to work. Why not get to sleep early at night, wake up earlier so that it's a less stressful drive? You're not worried about the time because you've got plenty of it, right? You probably find that you'll get to work quicker. You get to work ahead of time. You'll have time to organize your day before you start. The day just goes better. You end up not having to stay later at work to finish off what you thought you had to do. And you get home, you feel more energized. So the secret is the mornings. Now, there's a big part of this which there have been doctors speaking about infrared light, right?
Yes, we
Infrared
do.
light and the effects of it. It's a big gimmick industry around infrared gadgets, LED, which I'm not going to speak about whether they're good or not, but personally, if you ask me about infrared light, I'll say to you the most infrared light is sunrise and sunset. After sunrise in the morning, sunset. So you want to get outdoors early in the morning. If you can't be out in the early out part of the morning, you want to be outside in the sunset part. So you want to try and organize your life so that you can get one of those windows. If you can't do it during the week because of work, then make a point of doing it on the weekend when you can, because infrared actually penetrates through your skin. It actually has effect of generating hormones and affects dopamine levels, affects serotonin levels. And these hormones are going to put us in a particular state of mind, which are then going to affect the rhythm. Now, rhythm also represents habits, and habits are really important. That's another Venn diagram situation, spider diagram that has to be done. We've got to look at ourselves honestly and consider what are our habits. I spoke before about shadow work. This sort
Right.
of branches into shadow work because we look at our habits. What are our habits? What are our good habits? What are our bad habits? We need to be honest with ourselves, right? Well, the bad habit is I always put sugar in my tea, or I drink coffee instead of a herbal tea. Technically, that's a bad habit because we know that coffee is not really going to benefit our state of mind. And the more we drink coffee, the more toxic it becomes. So we want to then regulate our habits. How much coffee do I drink a day? Right? Keep track, balance everything. It's not bad to have a coffee, but if you're having too much coffee, it's going to affect your sleep cycles. And that's going to make you feel like you're at a deficit of energy when you wake up, which means you're going to push too hard. Because you push too hard, you lose. Swimming is a really good metaphor when we think about this, because I was super fit as a child, and I was like the fittest in my school, literally. So I could about keep up with the fast swimmers only because I was 5 times as fit as them. But like if you've got a good technique, you can go fast without that much effort. It's all about technique. It's about pacing yourself. It's about having good technique. Life is like that too. You get a good technique in life, a good habit, a good cycle, a good pattern, and everything else will come easily. Eat the right foods and you won't feel a deficit of energy because you'll be eating enough fruits, enough salads, enough raw foods, as well as healthy vegetables, right? And the body will be feeling energized by all the healthy food. So one will then not feel low energy and then desire that sugar hit. So instead of eating all of that sugar, have a smoothie in the morning, right? Then you've got your sugars, which are good sugars, polysaccharides and glucose from bananas and apples and raw honey in your smoothie. For example, you can make a beautiful smoothie. Probiotics is a big part of it too when it comes to the patterns, because we think that we're in charge of everything, but we don't realize the in our body, I think up to 50% of all the cells in our body are biotic cells that aren't our DNA, which is quite a head trip, right? So when we start to imagine, what is it, like 18 trillion either way? I don't know. The numbers have changed over the years, how many cells there are. But regardless, a lot of cells in our body are biotic cells. So building a good fauna in the body, probiotic, is really healthy. A little bit of raw yogurt. If you're vegan, make sure you eat sauerkraut, right? Eat things that feed the probiotics in the body, and life will get easier, because these probiotics in the body actually help to detoxify the body. They help to generate energy. The gut is so important, right? Like, your gut health is probably 50% of your psychology. And there's been a lot of psychologist papers coming out suggesting a significant link between gut health and psychology, right? Because
There's
your
also
gut health
been an
affects.
increase in the stomach and colon cancer, GI cancers, and with the younger population. Um, and if you're very stressed, you can guarantee you should stock up on toilet paper. You're going to be in the bathroom more. It seems. You just have to listen to your body. Um, we're running so fast, we don't really listen to our bodies as we should. Um, Maybe mention, you've told us before that Americans don't drink anywhere near the water we should drink. I tell my patients it's the most inexpensive medicine that you can have. Um, and so it's, you might want to talk about that just real briefly. How it
Yeah, well, the water is really important. Also, to try and make sure that the water is living. If you're drinking water from the taps, which a lot of people are, I would suggest the cheapest solution is to buy a fish tank pump. They're cheap. It costs about $5, $10, right? Little tiny,
Okay.
they fit in your hand this big. And
Yeah.
then you get a little silicone tube, and you get an all natural poured stone, and they use very little wattage. I think they use about 6 watts per hour. So that means if you run it for 12 hours, you're using about 80 watts, 70 watts. So if you run it for 10 days, you've used like 700 watts, right? If you run it for 30 days, you're using 2.5 units of electricity. That must be about $5 or something, or $4 a month to run a pump. That's all the time. And you can get a big pot, a big steel pot. Aluminium's not good, obviously. And you can put your water in the pot and you can bubble it. And once you've bubbled it, you can decant that water into jugs and bottles. And better not to drink it cool. Cold water is not particularly healthy for the pancreas, especially for the spleen. Room temperature water is like the best water. But what happens when you bubble the water is it actually breaks up the chlorine, and certain of the chemicals actually get disturbed. They break up. They actually evaporate off. They shift, they change. I know chlorine breaks up. So if there's chlorinated water where you are, you can break that up with a simple fish pump. There's a reason why fish require extra oxygen in the water. And another thing about the oxygen is when you move oxygen through the water, the positive hydrogen ions get released from the water. And positive hydrogen ions are effectively acidity. And the negative hydrogen ions that then remain produce a higher alkaline charge in the water. Now, most of the water is already quite acidic. So if you're drinking bottled water and you think you're okay, check the pH of your bottled water. Read the bottle. You'll be shocked. The World Health Organization suggests the water should be, I believe, around about 8. Yeah, 7.5 to 8.5 is a healthy pH for your water to be at. If I go to the local shop and buy bottled water, it's most likely going to be around 6, 6.5. Technically, that's acid rain. So you think you're getting away with it buying bottled water, you're drinking acid water. That bottled water has lost its oxygen, it's lost its charge. So you buy yourself a cheap $5 pH pen, you stick it in the water, you get an idea of the water pH. And you don't have to add any chemicals because it's an electrode. And so you can test the pH of your water, bubble the water for 12 hours and test the pH, and you'll be shocked to notice that the pH has risen significantly. If you bubble the water for long enough, it will often go up as high as a whole point. So if it's 6.5, it'll move to 7.5, for example. And that means that there's 10 times less positive hydrogen ions in the water than what there were between a pH of 6.5 and 7.5. The reason for this is that the negative, the positive hydrogen ions, when they go into the body, they are very useful for the anaerobic bacteria, the anaerobic fungi that live in the body. Now, the aerobic ones are what we call the probiotic ones. These ones thrive on more of a balanced alkalinity. So that when you get ill, your body becomes acidic. So generally speaking, our diets, processed food, creates acidity in the body. Most of our bodies are too acidic, so we generally have to increase the alkalinity in our body to reach a balance. Coffee produces acidity. Fruit juices produce acidity. Lemon,
Research
squeezing a
has shown
lemon
that most
into your
cancers
water.
don't do well with, or they don't do well in an alkaline environment. We're just about out of time, Patrick, but I would just love to thank you. And you gave us I never would have thought of getting a fish filter. Simple life hacks that don't raise your budget and stress your life anymore. Thank you so much for coming today. And as always, I'm very grateful to have you. And this has been a very informative show. I'm going to have to watch it a few times to really process everything. But your mind is just amazing, and thank you for sharing your gifts with us today. We'll be in touch, and you're at the end of your winter now, right? You're approaching spring, so hope you have a good springtime, and we'll be in touch. But thank you so much for opening up my show on this new platform. And all the rest of you, I would like to ask you to like and share our show and spread the word that we are on a new platform now. And that will be on my YouTube channel, which we will have posted shortly. Thank you for joining us today. And we'll be in touch, Patrick. Thank you so much.
This has been The Holistic Nurse with host Peggy Smith. Tune in each week where you're encouraged to send in questions and receive private responses and suggestions if appropriate. Thursdays, 1 p.m. Eastern.